In this video, we're going to look at creating a project using the Taiga software. This project will be Agile based project, and in particular we're going to use the Scrum methodology. So let's create a project by going to this button here, create new project. We're going to use Scrum. We need to give the project a name. For this example, we'll just call it a generic name, my project. And we also need to add a description about this project. Once again, we're going to give it a generic name. We're going to keep it as a private project, and we're going to create it. So as you can see here, we now have our project name. We have the Scrum drop-down menu here, and we have the backlog screen here. The backlog is where we can add user stories in, and we can see the points up here. But before we do that, we need to allocate the amount of points for the whole project and the number of sprints we estimate. So to do that, we need to go down to the settings, and we go to modules, and we can see the Scrum module here. Expected number of sprints. For this one, we're going to estimate at 3 sprints. These parameters can be changed at a later date. The expected total number of story points, we're going to say 100 for here. Then we're going to hit the save. Okay, let's go back to the backlog. We can see now it's populated a burn down chart here, where we have 100 points on the vertical axis and the number of sprints on the horizontal. So first sprint, second sprint, and third sprint. We can see this linear straight line here decreasing. This is the optimum line of consuming the points, user story points per sprint. In real life, the number of story points completed per sprint will differ, but it should remain roughly around this grey line until we complete all the points at the end of the project. So now we need to add some user stories into the backlog, and then we'll create some sprints over here and take these user stories and drag them into the sprints. So to do that, we can use this button or this button. We need a title for the user story, and we need to add some descriptive text here, and we can also add some tags to the story as well. We also need to add some points to the story over here. So let's call this first one logging in, and let's add the story. These stories have specific templates we should use. So I'm just going to copy and paste what I have at the moment. So that is the story. We can see it is quite short, 1 or 2 sentences. And we also need to add a acceptance criteria to this story. So we're going to paste that in there. So to complete this story, we need to be able to pass this acceptance criteria. We can also add some notes into the bottom, so I'll just paste that in there. Just to add a bit more information to the story. We can add some attachments if we need to, and now we need to assign some points to this story. So for this story, ten points there, 10 points for that one, 10 points for that one, and 10 points there. So a total of 40 points for this user story. It's a new user story, and we're going to create that story. We can see now it's populated that user story down here in the backlog. Let's create a couple more user stories. These other user stories that I'm going to put in for this example, we're just going to use generic text in here to populate the user stories. Okay, we've now created some user stories in here and assigned the points to these user stories. We can see at the top of the screen here, that's our project points that we defined in the settings, and this is the total number of defined points that if you were to add up all the points in the user stories, you'll get 100. So we just want to add a little bit more to these user stories. If we were to click on them again, we want to add a tag up here, and we can enter the value of these user stories. So the business value we can enter here. We can also add a section in here like we have here with attachments, where we can define extra information as well. But I'm going to enter the business value here, so it can be a string, for example, must have, good to have, that type of thing, or it can be a dollar value. So I'm just going to put a generic name in here, so business value equals something. Okay, that is one way to put the business value for a user story in. Hit the save button. We can also add extra tags, as many tags as we like. So if we hit that button again, that will change the color. Now to add an extra field in to this user story, we can go to settings or attributes, go down to custom fields, and we can add a custom field into any one of these categories. So here we have the user story custom fields. We can add business value in here as well. And we can make it any number, any data type. So we'll make it a text and we'll save. So if we go back into the backlog, we can see that tag there. But if we go into the user story itself, we can see the business value custom field is also there, so we can also change the business value here to what we like. And save it. Okay, so we have the user stories, but we haven't created any sprints yet. So to do that, we need to add a sprint. Let's call it sprint 1, the first one. The dates are automatically populated. Sprints normally run for about 2 weeks, and this is a 2-week time period. So we can see we've created one sprint here. You can see here it's populated the burn down chart. So we're currently at this location here. Once we have completed this sprint, this will go down however many points we've allocated to this sprint. So to allocate points to the sprint, we need to drag some user stories into the sprint. And that depends on the team's velocity, how many points they can complete within that 2-week period. So let's drag some user stories, but before we do that, we need to prioritize the backlog. So that is called backlog grooming. To do that, we simply order the user stories from highest priority on top to lowest priority on the bottom. So we can simply drag these user stories around how we see fit. So what happens is the higher priority user stories get dragged to the sprints first and get completed first. So let's drag these couple of user stories into sprint 1. All we do is drag up there and drop it. You can see it's populated here. And if we go into the sprint task board, we can see there is nothing in here at the moment. So we need to add to these user stories some tasks. So let's go back to the backlog. And take that user story out. Let's go into that user story. And we come down here to tasks. Let's add some tasks to this user story. So the tasks are actually the jobs that get done by the team to complete the user story. So once again, I'm going to add some generic naming to these tasks. In real life, we need to put a proper name that describes the task. Hit the save. We'll create a couple of tasks here for this user story. We can assign these tasks to different people within the team. If we enter the task itself, we can see we can add information to this task. So in this space here, if we click on it, we can enter the description of this task. We can add comments to the task. Okay, so I'm just going to go through these stories and add some tasks to these stories. Okay, we've now created tasks for each of these user stories, and we can now drag one task or multiple tasks, multiple user stories to a sprint. So let's drag this user story into the sprint 1. We can see it here. If we go into the sprint task board, we can now see those tasks that we created for this user story. The points are here. Currently it's in the new. If we shift it to the in progress, it means the team is working on it. It can be in different stages, those tasks. When it is completed by the team, they move it to the closed section or column. And we can see up the top here it's changed as well. So we have 100% complete on this sprint 1. 40 points have been completed and 4 closed tasks. So if we go back to the backlog, we can see the burn down chart has dropped down to this location because 40 points have been completed. So we're below the grey line, which is good, we're on time. Let's create another sprint. We can see that sprint has been automatically moved to the closed sprints. We can open it up again by hitting that button. And let's create another sprint. So add sprint 2. It's automatically populated the dates, but we can change those dates if we like. You can see the burn down chart has moved now to sprint 2 location, and it is sitting here, ready to have those user stories dropped into it. So let's drop some user stories into it. Okay, so we've dropped 2 user stories into the sprint 2. Let's take a look at the task board. Okay, so they're in the new column at the moment. The developers will be working on it, so they'll move it into the in progress as they go through the project. We can see the number of points assigned to this user story over here. And once again, we can move it to the closed once the tasks have been completed. Down the bottom of this board, we have sprint issues. We can add any issues that the team has with this sprint just by clicking here. Add a new issue. We need to add a subject line here and some text here. We can add attachments. We can change the type of issue here. and then hit the create. We can see it populates it down here. So at the moment it's set to in progress this issue, but we've completed all the tasks. So if we go back, we can see it's deducted those 5 points, completed 5 points there. This user story here, the second user story inside the sprint, currently has no tasks associated to it. So let's create some tasks for this user story first. Go back into that sprint. We now have that task. Let's pretend we've had it in progress. We've tested it, and now we've closed it off. You can see that points have incremented. We've got 100% complete on this sprint 2. But we still have this issue down the bottom here that we haven't completed. We go back to the backlog. You can see that has dropped down a little bit, 5 points. But the sprint itself hasn't automatically moved to the closed sprints. That is because that issue is still open. If we go back into the sprint and then close the issue, then go back to the backlog, and we can see the sprint 2 has now been put in the closed section. So we need another sprint to run or work on these user stories. So let's create another sprint. The dates have automatically populated again. And the burn down chart has moved across to the sprint 3 location. Let's drag the user stories into sprint 3. And there they are. We can also order the user stories in priority order as well in the sprint backlog here for the team to prioritize the sprint backlog, how the order in which they do these tasks. Let's go into sprint 3 task board. We can see the tasks and the new column. Let's move them all into the in progress. So we have 1 user story, 2 user stories, and 3 user stories with their associated points and their tasks. Once again, we could add sprint issues here. Say for example, we had a problem, one of the team members had a problem undertaking this task. If we select it, we edit the card, and we hit this little pill looking symbol. Go save. It puts a marker on this task here. This one should increment by 1. If we go back and back in, we can see it's 1 iocane dose. So what that means, there's a problem. The team member is not able to complete this one for some reason. and it needs to be looked at further. But once it is complete, we can move it to the closed section. And we can see here 100% complete on this sprint and 7 tasks closed. We can go in and change that back to take the iocane dose off this task if we've completed it successfully, just by clicking that. If we were to refresh the page, that'll go back to 0. We go back to the backlog screen, we can see the burn down chart has gone to where it's supposed to be, the green line. Our 100 project points have been closed, 100 here, and our 100 story points are there. This number here is the team velocity, so it takes the average number of points completed per sprint and divides it by the number of sprints, and you get this number, the average number of points completed per sprint by the team, which is called the team velocity. So the project is 100% complete, and that completes the project. We can see all the sprints are in the closed portion here, which we can open up here to have a look at if we need to. Our backlog is also empty.